Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the September 16th meeting of the Richmond Selectboard. Before we begin with our warrant agenda, would anybody care to make a public comment? Moving on. Nobody in Zoom land either. Okay. Josh, board, any additions, deletions, or modifications to tonight's agenda? We just might get out of here by 9:40. Okay, moving into our warrant agenda. First, we have a presentation of the Chittenden County Regional Planning Commission Annual Report and related issues. And Charlie Baker is with us. Welcome, Charlie.
Hi, good evening. Thank you for giving me time on your agenda. With me is Maya Balasa, new planner in our office. And I'll tell you in a few minutes why she's here. So the suspense is killing you. So thank you for the time. And I think most of you have been here in other years when I've been here. This is as much of anything as a customer service call to make sure we're providing services to you in the way that you expect. You've got a report in your packet.
You want me to share any of it? Would it be helpful to walk through it?
I'm gonna maybe the second the attachment.
Okay.
But the report, I'm gonna go through I want to review the report of what we did, for you last year. And unless you want to spend a lot of time on it, I don't want to dwell on that because I want to get to a second document that we attached with a summary of Act 181, which is that Act 250 bill that passed, and start talking about some of the implications of that and why Maya's here. Because there's some work that we collectively all need to do, and we'll talk about that in a minute. The report itself, and for those of you who aren't looking at it, the first page of the report gives you some background on the Regional Planning Commission. We were formed 58 years ago. We have a 29-member board. Our budget last year was about $6 million. We'd leverage 500,000 or so of local funds to bring in that other $5.4 million of federal and state funds. Thanks, John. Might as well follow along.
We're looking, so I
Yeah,
figured,
right.
I figured I'd put it up.
All right, I'm down at the bottom of this page.
Okay.
And then your representatives on our committees are noted for last fiscal year. So these are sometimes they change. I don't know that you have any changes coming up yet, but thank you for their service. Thank you to Bart, who's been an officer on our board and serves on our executive committee because he can't have enough meetings. He's never said that. That was me having fun. The second page is specific activities that we did in Richmond this past year, Cochrane Road scoping, some municipal project management on the Bridge Street sidewalk project, the Gateway feasibility study, looking at improving the shoulder widths on Route 2, energy implementation, GIS information, a variety of technical assistance, some around land use, zoning things, traffic data, road erosion, and then there's a couple traffic counts we did. It looks like 3 traffic counts we did in Richmond. I'm on the third page now. And then just a little note on the older adults and persons with disabilities transportation program, where we convene quarterly those providers. You had 198 trips last fiscal year. So any questions or feedback on any of that work for me? All right. Yeah. Well, silence is, I'm going to take that as a positive thing. And then you do have obviously the resurfacing project, which looks like is it done?
Route 2?
Yeah, Route 2.
I think that's what the final.
Okay.
Done. They're going to do that in the spring, I believe.
I think they might be done.
I think
They were doing a punch list
Oh.
this past spring that we looked at from like sewers and manholes. I think they're done.
Yeah, it felt
course,
done
bridge
from this.
is not.
The bridge will be done. The bridge will be open before winter.
Oh, I know, but it's
Oh.
it's not done yet.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's still under construction, the 89 bridge. Yeah, and then you got another culvert that's in the capital program for the state, is also in our transportation improvement program. And just a little note, like our board has to approve these projects that get federal transportation funding, which is kind of a negative power that the RPC board has, which is we could vote to take something out, which we flirted with a little bit in some conversation, not at the board, but, and so it's just kind of a negative authority. Like if, the municipalities don't like what V-Trans is doing with the federal funds, we could stop a project, but we can't really force them to do a project. So as we, kind of talked through Route 2 over the last couple of years. And then the last couple of pages are just a pretty long list of activities that we call regional activities that we do without regard to any specific municipality. The first one is the ECOS plan. And, we've started doing some engagement for our regional plan, including underrepresented communities. And frankly, we've been stretching the timeline out as a result of some legislative changes. So that's the second topic I really want to talk to you about, is what Act 181 is requiring of us. And so that you're in the loop, because we will have to have some more conversation with the town, just to make sure we're moving together as well as we can. We've been still trying to do work on equity and trying to figure out how to do that as best as we can. Mostly it's been a lot of focus internally. We just adopted a new code of conduct. Happy to share any of that if you'd like. And of course, housing has been a primary issue. That was a lot of the reason we were talking about Act 250 changes. Act 47 last year, of course, had changes that the legislature made to all the municipalities and in terms of zoning requirements. So, happy to provide any support we can to the town on that. I think we probably already have been doing some of that. And we're still trying to encourage more housing construction in the Building Homes Together campaign. Energy planning, other transportation planning, clean water work, communications union district, brownfields. Happy to take any feedback or questions on any of those topics. Yes, sir.
When I was meeting with the VLCT policy boards for this coming legislative session, and we were talking about housing, the thing that all of this kind of came back to was we can throw as much money toward housing as we want without water and sewers not going anywhere. And so that's one of the VLCT's proposals for the coming year, is that we need to put money into that. I was at that legislative breakfast that we had a year sometime back, and you put up that map showing here's where there's water and sewer, here's where there's housing, and then there's us. And so anything that we can do to leverage, if you can wave a magic wand and make us have water and sewer out to the interstate, or anything that helps in any way with that, that would be huge. I don't think there is a magic wand.
Yeah. Yeah, I have longer thoughts about that. Yeah. And DEC, I believe, has quite a bit of money in that pot already. I think, so sorry, I'll say some things. Apologies, DEC folks, if there's any in the room or listening. But some of the process they've set up to get that money into the ground is so challenging that it's hard to move that money. We just saw Westford last year went, right, there through a lot of discussion, 14 years of discussion, and failed vote. And but there's some process things that would make it easier that I'm hoping that they look at.
But I think I can truthfully say if we had water out to the gateway, a lot of our housing problems would just not even be there. Because people can't get loans.
Yeah. No, that's a good topic. Happy to work more on that.
Charlie, I draw a nexus or a connection between that and some of the conversations we've had quite recently about the tensions within the county between Burlington and especially the neighboring larger municipalities about people are unhoused and where they go and the impact on communities and who's doing their share to do whatever. And I had a short conversation with folks from the larger community saying, Richmond doesn't have shelters. We don't have motel programs. Really, one of the few things we could do or try to do in the near term is get more housing. And that is related to both the infill and it's related to legislative action, but also, water and sewer is a kind of gotta have for a lot of the substantial housing developers.
Virginia would swear to you that that's exactly right.
So I'll just say that's one of the conversations that I've had with other members in the regional planning commission sort of venue is, so what's our role? Like, we're not going to do some of the things that the bigger municipalities do, but we could be helpful or perhaps more helpful in terms of addressing a housing shortage.
So speaking of that, so in Act 181, so there's just a 2-page summary. There you go. Thanks, Josh. So this is kind of a quick overview. This is from the RPC perspective. There's a lot of other things that are in Act 181 that are not in this summary. So this is, a very RPC centric perspective. But fundamentally, they went to a location-based jurisdiction system. So rather than just the size of your project, it's now about where the project is. And so you may have seen a press release out from the governor's office in the last week or two talking about interim exemptions. There were interim exemption areas set up, but they're really set up around like the designated villages and designated downtowns and some buffer area around those. But I think you have your village center in place. And so I think it's a 1/4 mile out buffer. And there's a map online that you can check out if you're interested in that. And it also is updating the state designation programs so that instead of the way it used to be done, it's going to be much more tied into the regional plans, future land use map. And so that's that it's taking on a level of importance it's never had before. And so that's really my message here of like, we're going to be working on that map. And we really want to work with the town. As our planner assigned to Richmond to work with you and maybe primarily your planning commission, maybe just to kind of, I'm hoping that things are kind of gel, that our plan and your plan, kind of come together. But we also, there's some new state definitions of specific land use areas to make the whole state consistent. So we don't really know yet if there's some rubs. So partly, I think one message I want to hear you say is like, we're still here to support the town, even if we have some rubs. And at that point, I'll blame the state for sure on the what's in statute. And but we'll be working on this over the next 6-9 months. So just I really I'm starting off this process really by making sure the select board's aware. If you could give the planning commission a heads up, we'll be communicating them sometime in the next few months. I don't think we're not rushing out in the next few weeks, but heads up. We are going to be having you work on this map a little bit together. I'm hoping we'll try to make it as smooth as we can. And then there's some more process-oriented requirements on us to do what's called meaningful participation and look at environmental justice areas. Involving marginalized communities, those who haven't typically shown up at meetings like this. But also we have to take a look at environmental benefits and burdens to those marginalized communities. So, or environmental justice communities. And at least on preliminary mapping, it looked like 137 out of 144 census block groups in Chittenden County were considered environmental justice locations because they have a pretty low threshold of any census block that has more than 6% say non-white or BIPOC residents. And our county is closer to 15%. So almost our whole county crosses that threshold. We'll have some more conversations with the state just to make sure that's what they really want us to do. But the other aspect is we need to tie those maps into housing targets. If you can scroll up a little bit there, Josh. There's a consultant right now, actually Vermont Housing Finance Agency, following up from the housing needs assessment. You saw some of that news came out in the last few weeks. The state has 6 months to follow that up with longer term housing targets for the state and for each region. And then the legislature is requiring us to work with each town to establish municipal targets. There has always been language somewhat like that in statute, but this is definitely tightening it up and making a much clearer process. And then they're asking the state to kind of monitor the progress in housing and report back every year on how things are going. But our early look at that, and Bart, this is to your point about, building housing in Richmond. I don't know, my early sense is that it may not be a lot more than the trend of what's been happening, at least in Chittenden County, maybe a little bit more, but I'm hoping it's not, double your pace of growth that you've been experiencing, but stay tuned. That's another key component. So there's a map paired with housing targets. There's obviously still going to be rural development that happens, one lot at a time or one house at a time. I think the question is, how much more can happen in these water and sewer service areas,
Right.
back to your point. So that's real quick on the second page of this in the last part of my, we had some goals for engagement, but then we have kind of 6 phases, just to give you a sense of the process we're going through. We're doing some internal work now, trying to get prepared for more public conversation. Phase 2, this is really the kickoff of phase 2, informing the select board about some of these requirements and this process. So we're just starting this phase 2. Phase 3, trying to figure out how to do that environmental benefits and burdens analysis or assessment. We haven't really seen one of those before, so we'll be creating something new. And then hopefully later in the winter, we'll be looking at a draft future land use map and
Nice.
Oh, thank you. And then and phase 5, we kind of pull the map together with the targets, make sure it all fits together. And then finally, phase 6 is bringing it back to our board. And then the other thing that is a new requirement in Act 181 is regional plans to date have always been stopped at the Regional Planning Commission. Regional Planning Commission adopts the plan and it's done. There's no review or an approval of it. This Act 181 is adding a review and approval process by a new board, which is taking the place of the Natural Resources
Right,
Board.
which they're looking for members on.
Yeah, they just advertised for the Land Use Review Board. I think the deadline was today.
Yeah.
Hope
It
somebody.
was impressive how many hours they wanted you to commit. It's like a full-time job.
It is a full-time job.
Yep.
Oh, they're paying decent salaries. It is a full-time job, but that Land Use Review Board is the board that will approve it. Our plan expires June 2026. We're looking to finish, I'm hoping more like the winter 25, 26. So that's kind of the process we're on the schedule, maps and housing targets, but really wanted to make sure you had a heads up and happy to take any questions or suggestions. Also, if there's any groups in your town that you think beyond the select board and the planning commission, if there's any committees or other groups or neighborhoods or that you think we should spend some more time with, we're happy to take that input now or subsequently.
Adam, this is kind of your area of development. Any thoughts?
I don't, off the top of my head now, have anything that would contribute a ton at the moment, more absorbing.
Yeah, and I know, yeah, I just threw a lot at you. So if you do have some thoughts, please, email me directly or I'm sure Josh would relay if you want to, or
Jeff?
I'm Jeff Forward. I'm the town energy coordinator. We're intending to apply for a municipal energy reserveness program grant. Your energy advisor, Ann Janet, has been quite helpful.
good.
In the spirit of throwing it back on the state, the agency that is responsible for this program, building and general services, has not been great. And I wonder if you could speak to that so the board understands what the challenges have been even thinking about this grant program. The application, we were only available to apply for this grant last week. And the deadline is next week. And we just got the energy assessment or a draft of it today. And it has to be based on that. And it doesn't include very many measures that we have identified in this building as being useful measures to do.
Hmm.
So like, I don't know exactly what to do with that, but it would be helpful for the board to understand, not just from me, but from you, how challenging it has been to work with BGS on this particular program. So, it wasn't me dragging my feet.
Yeah.
And what I'm thinking, and I would like your opinion on this. State has $35 million to allocate towards this program. There was a webinar on Friday. There were like 80, 90 people who participated in that webinar, and I would assume that those represented towns that were interested, you know, minus some staff people. There might have been 70 or 80 total.
Mhm.
$35 million divided by 80, that's many hundreds of thousands. Town that could be eligible. The dollar amount, kind of measures that they're talking about for smaller towns is in the tens of thousands of dollars at best, organization, that kind of thing.
Right.
So, it's an interesting challenge. We'll talk about it later. I'm feeling we ought to apply for it because at the end of the day, they need to get the money out the door and then wait, just go, okay, you can have it. But is that, am I being crazy or what?
The ending.
Yeah, thanks, Jeff, for setting me up here. So the grant program, which BGS is the Municipal Energy Resilience Program, MERP. Even from the outset at the legislature, it got set up to really target the most highly energy burdened towns. And for better or worse, we didn't really get much chance to review the methodology by which they calculated highest energy burden towns. And so almost, I'm gonna say no Chittenden County town qualified as high energy burden. Our incomes are higher, et cetera. So that was kind of a frustration at the outset, and even though there certainly are poorer towns or poorer sections of towns in Chittenden County as well. So and then and I can't remember, I think they were kind of targeting, maybe the bottom 40 or the top 40%, however you want to think about that. And a few weeks ago, they asked all the RPCs for like, oh, what kinds of projects or do you think we're going to get for these highest energy burden towns? Gave them a list. It didn't come up to 35 million. And because initially this grant proposal only went out to the highest energy burden towns. And then, so a week or two ago, they shifted gears when they realized they probably were not going to get enough projects and opened it up to all towns. Even though there's still this highest energy burden screen, I think that they're going to be trying to accomplish. So I think, Jeff, I can't argue with you. I think there's at least a chance that they won't have enough applicants or not enough big projects that if you have a decent sizable project that you could be in a good position to get money, but it's really hard to tell. And they didn't really move the deadline, or I can't remember if they moved the deadline a week.
Maybe a week.
Yeah. So there's certainly a lot of frustration around the state about that process, Jeff. So you're not alone. You got a lot of good company. So, have any other questions or issues?
You can see I've got a question, but I'm trying to figure out what it is. Totally different subject. Your future land use maps, what level of detail and length of time are those expected to cover?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'm not sure the statute is completely clear about it. Because we do at least 20-year transportation planning, we've always been thinking about it more in those 20+ year horizons. I think the housing targets are going to be out to 2050. So, and partly there's a strategic reason to do that. It's just to, it's easier to kind of slowly grow up than, like you saw the numbers that just came out from the housing needs assessment, like, we need 24,000 to 36,000 houses in the next 5 years. Well, we've only been building 2,000 houses a year. That's 10.
And most of those are clustered very small geographic area.
Well, there's half of them that are spread out all over Vermont, and then half that have been kind of more urban oriented, I'll say, if I can use the word urban in Vermont, I don't know. So, that's as much as it's kind of where things are.
The reason I ask is you're familiar with the official map? The
Yep.
term official map. You know, if we had something like that, it would make our lives a lot easier as far as planning and communicating.
Yeah.
But it's a lot of work.
Yeah,
for
usually,
town to come up with an official map. It would
and the
take
official
years.
map is usually more for town property, you know, if you want a path or a road or a park.
Yeah.
So that a developer knows that the town already has their hand up, they
Hmm.
want a portion of that land for a public purpose. This will be much more similar to your town future land use map that guides your zoning.
Mhm.
So it'll be more, where's the residential area, where's the commercial district, those kinds of more uses like that.
Yeah, how well,
But it is going to be it's going to be fairly specific. There's going to be lines on the map. It's
Okay.
not going to be fuzzy.
okay, well, we'll definitely react to it.
Yeah,
It'll be.
that I'm sure.
iteration process, I hope. Okay, that's good. I mean, anything in that direction is a welcome change, I think, because we tend to kind of get in our own way. A lot of the town isn't developable.
Mhm.
Be great if it was just flat. We'd say, well, we want houses here, one house there, put roads in, there you go. You know, it's
Yeah.
not that easy. This is not Indiana.
Yeah.
So it's something that is really difficult to plan on the municipal level.
Yeah.
And in turn, it makes it hard for developers to have certainty to go out and acquire land. Therefore, it makes it hard for us to plan because they're not built, it's.
Yeah.
We're in this chicken and egg thing. So I hope you're able to break that cycle a little bit.
Well, yeah, we will see. I'm hopeful too. And I should mention that there is kind of a decent amount of flooding perspective in doing these maps too. We don't want to encourage, I know you're talking about Barry, just before the meeting started, we don't want to encourage a lot of things to be in flood prone areas where people are, and property are going to be in, unsafe situations, right? And it doesn't mean nothing can happen in the floodplain. If you already have a building, you can, if you can redevelop it so that it's safer. Yeah, right. Or at least not add any fill, right? So yeah, we'll be kind of looking at that. There's a lot more to be happening on the flood resiliency side, and floodplain
It's been
mitigation.
proven to be a big need. So.
Yeah. No, I think it was a number one priority the governor gave to all his departments in terms of budgeting this year is like flooding, and number two was housing. So we'll be taking a look at that. So thank you. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Oh, I have one
We look
quick
forward to
question.
working
Oh,
with
yeah,
you.
sorry.
We have a special meeting in the select board next Monday.
Oh, something about stormwater.
I think Josh might have invited you.
Yeah, I'm hoping Dan can make it.
Not to put you on the spot.
Yeah, it says no reply.
Yeah.
So what are you doing next week?
Yeah.
So I'm just going to observe, as somebody who sat with the Regional Planning Commission and the executive group, that the combination of Charlie and staff do a lot of different things. I've been really struck by the breadth and depth of things that they're involved in. I 8 years ago, I wouldn't have thought like health equity is an issue for Regional Planning Commission, but it has like different things that sort of hit the radar. But the sort of bread and butter of planning started with transportation, then moved on really from my perspective into all these other things of stormwater in particular, which is really thorny for a lot of the small towns. But I just wanted to give kudos to Charlie and staff to deal with the breadth and depth of the issues that they have. And that is part of the point, is finding the right person sometimes within the staff.
Yeah, and unfortunately, I will be at another select board meeting and city council meeting next Monday, but I don't know, I might prefer to be in your conversation. But I think one thing I will offer as part of that is, and just based on the conversation I saw last week in Shelburne, I am wondering if we need to do like pulling more together, because this is no single town's issue. This is an issue DEC. The state has created a bit, and there's got to be an easier path forward than what's going on right now. But you're not alone. So I wonder if there's a little bit of a group conversation we need to have, or even with DEC to talk about a more constructive way to move forward here.
Makes sense.
That makes sense to me.
Mhm.
Yeah, let us know if we can help with that regard.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Nice to
Thank you.
meet you all.
All right.
Yeah, thank you much.
Thanks.
So next on our agenda is consideration of holding a special meeting on Monday, September 23rd to discuss stormwater permit 39-9050 for the Southview subdivision. Josh, you probably have more information on this since we last spoke. You want to head this conversation?
Sure. So there's a few things. I think the main thing to touch on here is to finalize or mostly finalize an agenda. To have a special select board meeting next Monday to focus solely on this issue. So maybe I'll lay out a few topics. You tell me where you want to start. I've got a draft agenda that we can review. I've got a list of people that I've invited to the meeting that, from the state and some engineers as well that we can review as far as who can be here. And we also have an update on the neighborhoods that are or are not included. Maybe we start on that one.
Would it be helpful to pull up the draft agenda?
Sure, we can do that, if that's where you want to go.
Yeah, let's live life on the edge.
So the draft agenda, put it together. So the first time we would talk about the boundary of the permit area. Then we would move on to discussion of how it was determined that the permit applies to the Southview subdivision to address those concerns that came up at the last meeting, those questions. Then next steps to obtain coverage under permit. Our attorney has several thoughts on that process. He can help lead that. And then overview of the process from initial engineering to construction completion. And I've got an engineer that we had engaged with about a little over a year ago who's done a number of these that can help us with that process. And on item number 2, I should note that we will have at least 2 representatives from the state here who are very well versed on a 3-acre permit and probably help us get into that a little bit more, items 1 and 2.
Art?
Can we foreshadow any news about boundary of the permit area?
Yeah, so on the boundary of the permit area, I did have a letter from the state that they are carving out the Mary Drive and Hidden Pines neighborhood. That was combined with that when we had the permit prior to the 3-acre rule. And at that point, it was a couple $100 for the permit every few years, a few $100 on engineering. We've got a number of these sites in Richmond. They look at that and they agree that for the 3-acre rule, those 2 neighborhoods were never 3-acre permits on their own. So even the amount of impervious in each one of those is less than 3 acres. So they're going to take those out and just focus on the Southview subdivision. Now, exactly what that subdivision means and that map, that's where I think we still need to define those boundaries. I did ask the state if they could help us better define exactly which parcels are included in that. And they said they'd work on it, but I don't know that they have a 100% perfect idea of where that is. So, but
But they might by next week.
that's unclear too. I think that they said that some of this too is as they sort of hone in on the engineering, which sort of seems a little cart before the horse because we need to know exactly what we're looking at there. But I think that the representatives from the state can certainly help answer that better than I'm able to at this point. But I think the big news is that Mary Drive and Hidden Pines, those neighborhoods are carved out. Now, if you're on the border, I can't tell you if you're in or out, right? Because there's certainly some houses, especially Mary Drive or Hidden Pines, where it connects with Southview. People might have questions, which development am I in? And I don't know. We're trying to get a better view of that.
You know, just thinking in terms of like project management, project charter, the scope of the project is one of the foundational things. You
Mhm.
do that at the very beginning. So this seems like a relevant question to nail down, like what are the actual boundaries for the scope?
Yeah,
Of the
this is being very badly run on the part of the state. They're telling people jump immediately, you must do this.
Mhm.
We just don't know who.
Yeah.
But if we haven't jumped yet, it's too late.
Yeah,
Mhm.
but they're scaring the heck out of numerous residents and they don't have their act together.
Right.
Yeah.
Any
So
questions on boundaries? Yes,
Hi, Danielle Bedoin.
they come
Hidden
up, we
Pines.
can't hear them.
yeah,
Is up here better?
Yes.
So Danielle Bedoin, Hidden Pines. This boundary question is pertinent to Hidden Pines, Mary Drive, as we're less than 3 acre. And it's seems clear these are three separate locations. And so it sounds like that those three separate permitted areas can go ahead with their individual renewal processes. And if that is the case, Josh, could you perhaps share some of the information that's known about those specific neighborhoods that you shared earlier
Yeah.
by email with me?
Yep, so I've got an email back from the state. So as I mentioned, prior to 3-acre rule was fairly inexpensive, not as costly as a 3-acre permit, and fairly simple process where we would hire an engineer every year to inspect the development. So let's just say Mary Drive. So they would go out there, they would inspect Mary Drive, look at culverts, look at ditches, send the report to the state as an annual update. And then I think it's like every 5 years, there's a $240 administrative fee to renew the permit. So prior to 3-acre rule, it was sort of handled administratively by the town. We would file the permit, pay for the permit, we'd pay for the engineer to do it. There's no homeowners associations to split it with, so the town just paid it. It was, a few $100 a year in engineering and a few $100 every couple of years in the permit fees. So going forward, they're going to be basically very similar from what the state tells me, is that it'll be a $240 administrative fee every 5 years, annual inspections, and that'll be for Mary Drive and for Hidden Pines. I would recommend that the town goes back to just paying that. There's really no way to split that. The only exception that we have for these permits is in Greystone. So prior to 3-acre rule, they have a homeowners association that focuses solely on stormwater. And they actually would hire the engineer, do the annual permit. They would split it with the town. So we would pay half the permit fee. I think we paid half the engineering for the inspection. And again, it was very administratively handled. In these instances, there's no homeowners association. I propose that we just pay the few $100 a year and move forward, but wanted to bring that to the board, especially as stormwater is becoming exceedingly more complicated.
I have no objection to the board just paying it,
As we've done in the past.
as we've done in the past.
Yeah, good point.
Do you need a motion?
Why don't I figure out the notices of intent? 'Cause I think we have to file some notices of intent for this because the ones that we had from the past have expired. And then come back with the actual notices of intent and invoices. And then we can go from there. But I mean, if it's a consensus of the board, hopefully that gets you the answer that you're looking for. And all the rest of the residents as well.
Yes, for the residents that have these exact questions of those individual permits for Hidden Pines, Mary Drive. What is that renewal process, which you just laid out? Who would be taking responsibility for them? And then would we have to be included in this special meeting, which seemingly the priority is for the Southview subdivision? And so I think that would be a great help to at least start the narrowing of your scope of what the discussion will be for next week. And just my understanding with my limited research with this, just the Hidden Pines, I live in Hidden Pines, the Hidden Pines permit that is in question is really a subsection of that neighborhood that was developed at one specific point. It's about that I know of. And so to Josh's point, there might be some boundary line questions that still will come up of the parcels that do border the larger Southview subdivision. So those residents still may have questions, but at least the residents that are known to be on the specific Hidden Pines permits will have clearer answers ahead of next week.
So the existing Hidden Pines permit has specific properties?
That I'm also not super clear on exactly what the boundary is for that. I think we need to make sure we're really clear on these going forward.
It would seem to me that the state needs to be clear because they're establishing the boundaries here. And
Right.
so which specific parcels, the actual parcels of property are in scope. And then literally get it on a map where you can say
Right.
in scope, out of scope.
That's my concern because what people in Hidden Pines might consider Hidden Pines might not be what the state's considering Hidden Pines. So,
Once it's out in the
And
open.
I think we're reluctant to try to speak on behalf of the state, given not only a general principle, but recent experience.
yes,
Right now, I'm getting the impression that if we ask two people from the state,
we'll get to
we get different answers. That's the disturbing thing, is there's just no rhyme and reason to this. Hopefully next week, the people from the state, well, I hope they have thick skin, but hopefully they can bring us a little bit more clearer
Yeah.
information.
In my communications with Terry from the state, he seems very well versed in the permit and the process. So I think he'll be helpful in the meeting.
Okay,
If we come out of next week with.
these are the
a clear
parcels, these are
yes,
the, yeah.
that should be the goal.
That'd be first.
And I suspect we're not going to go into the meeting with that, but hope to emerge from the meeting with that.
Yeah.
With the boundary.
Yes, I agree.
And so to add to the agenda, then just defining the boundaries of the specific permits, the individual
Yeah,
permits,
correct.
and I think that's been a point of confusion for some of the residents,
Sure.
that this has been specifically Southview, but knowing that that would be on the agenda would be helpful. Thank you.
One other thing about next week's meeting, I know that last meeting, we had people stacked all the way out to the far side of the foyer out there. Do we maybe want to consider holding this meeting across the street? So that we don't have everybody interested standing.
If it's available, you sure?
Good idea. I would assume everybody's gonna come.
Yeah, I think every landowner up there is going to come. So if it's available, I definitely think we should look into that. It's not very democratic when you're going, what are they saying?
Yeah, I'll check with the library and with MMCTV to make sure they can handle the audio visual too, because. But I agree, if any meeting should move over there, this one I think has a high probability of needing to.
Should we update the agenda with one, boundary of permit area, including specific properties?
Maybe we say defining Southview, Hidden Pines and Mary Drive.
To the like parcel level.
Yeah,
That would be probably the only way to do it.
Yeah, we may not walk out of that meeting with an exact
we probably won't.
map, but at least we'll have the conversation to say this is what we need.
But I think it seems to me that is a product that needs to emerge.
Oh, yeah.
Like, because somewhere there will be a line and on this side it's in and that side's out. So where does that line?
Yeah.
And I suspect other people may want to debate the criteria by which the line is established. Is it based on Act 250 permit history or something else?
And I think that's then item number 2, is once we say, okay, it's generally this area, then the question is, well, why?
Mhm.
Why that area?
And it gets, but I don't want to avoid this very detailed question because it's down to the leaves on the trees. It's not just the forest. It's
Yeah.
like property.
6 months from now,
Interact.
we could be arguing about something that could be settled.
That should have
Period,
been a
stop.
part of my understanding is that those boundaries would have been a part of the previously renewed separate permits. Because they were relatively renewed prior to 2020. And so theoretically, with those permits, there should be clear boundary lines for those smaller neighborhoods.
Right.
And hopefully, if easily found, then you could, at the top of the meeting, exclude those residents, and then you have
Okay.
your larger group still determining what boundaries are the residents that are involved with those boundaries.
Hand up on this.
Yeah. Robin, I see you have your hand up. Go ahead.
Thank you. I think it would be helpful for the state if we listed street names instead of Southview subdivision. Because as a property owner on Southview, I don't belong to a subdivision in my mind, so maybe that's useful for them to see us as we see ourselves.
That sounds reasonable. You're right.
It's kind of where the original problem came from
Yeah.
is artificial.
Might be on the permit, does that include everything? If something's off, I don't know.
So I guess the
I
question is,
would-
do we reword the wording of 2 to
Yes.
discussion of how it was determined?
Which properties the
Yeah.
permit applies to? Because it strikes me,
How
the
Southview became one big permit.
Yeah,
inexactitude of
Sure.
the term Southview subdivision is not helpful.
Right.
In this
I
regard.
was gonna ask about that. It's kind of, here we go.
I mean, that's obviously sort of going on what the state has been calling it most recently. So add which properties, which streets, item two, just say like.
Well, I
determine-
think we could
determine
even
which
ignore
properties and which
streets.
streets.
I
How
just
about we
say
just say
it's which
which
parcels.
properties?
Because if we look on the property map, it's got, each one has a number,
Yeah.
right?
Mhm.
They are, it's like, it's a catalog. So in this catalog of parcels of properties, which are in, and then people could debate why one is in or not in.
Yeah.
But they should have some criteria by which they decide which parcels are in.
It might be parcels and streets, because part of it is a municipal.
Of course.
which would-
Yeah,
so
that
maybe
makes
we
sense.
Put both in, but I like the
Parcels
idea
on
of
street.
the catalog of the streets. So I'll put that in there. I won't name specific parcels or streets, but I'll say that's our goal, is to get to that point in
Yes.
item number 2. Okay, good.
June, I see you have your hand up. Go ahead.
Yes, thank you. So I think it would be important to get some, when we get the documentation for this meeting, that it includes the previous boundary lines, because from my understanding, what I was told is that when Southview was developed, there was no plan to have houses on the Jericho Road side of the bridge that's on Southview. So now we are, it seems to be included, the 2 houses on that section of the road. So how did we get from not being in the neighborhood to being in the neighborhood? But I
Yeah.
think going back and looking at the documentation from the beginning will be helpful to have for this meeting.
We'll get what I can. I don't know if I'll have everything. I agree, at some point that will be helpful to define the permit boundary. I just don't know that I've got all those maps readily available.
But isn't it the state's obligation to do that?
I think that.
I
that
mean,
would be-
they are
yeah,
applying the 3-acre rule
Yep.
to
That's,
This area.
something. What is that?
This
Something.
vague defined area.
yeah, and I think that's what we're looking for from them, is a specificity of what's in, why is that in, and why is that not in?
And I think all things being equal, we would argue it's as narrow as possible, to June's point, unless there is evidence that it's in scope. And they have some reason to say it's in scope, would we not conclude that it's not in scope? Because it wasn't built at the same time or wasn't envisioned as part of the initial. I'm gonna use the word development plan, because I don't know what the other words.
Which,
That makes
Construction.
sense.
Okay.
Good. Anything else for item 2?
Would it be worth trying to define the boundaries of the permits that are excluded too, knowing full well
Yeah.
that there probably will not be less regulations coming down? We might be in the same situation for.
Yeah.
more. You know, probably not needed for this, but it might get us ahead of it.
Yeah, I'll ask what the state has on file for those boundaries.
So maybe
Yeah.
maybe that boundary will depend on what a new law and regulation would be.
Yeah.
So we can't do that, but at
Okay.
least define the other permits.
yeah. Good.
And-
Let's not go through this again for something else.
Sharing Charlie Baker's comment here earlier today, that one guesses there may be other towns similarly situated.
Yeah.
I mean, it's one thing if a developer comes in and all of it's built at once.
Right.
And it's clear or clean, at least, that you're either in or out of scope. But it should not be surprising that there's at least some other part of the state where things were developed in stages, perhaps by different people. And that the state is then also facing the issue of scope and in or out of scope based on whatever that consideration is.
It'll be helpful if CCRPC can have somebody here next week
That comes up.
to share some of that knowledge.
Anything
We
else
wanna
on
have
2?
Ironed out before that gets.
I don't have anything else.
Are we ready to discuss 3?
I don't hear anybody saying not.
Any modifications to agenda item 3?
May I ask a question?
Of course.
Shannon Walters.
Please come up though.
Shannon Walters, I live on Westall Drive, and my question would be a question of clarification. At the last meeting, we raised the question about funding that's available through the Permit Obtainment Assistance
Mhm.
Program through the Agency of Natural Resources and the deadline that is looming. Has the select board committed to applying for those funds?
The last meeting. you
We did,
motion
we've
to
made a
apply.
vote.
Okay, so
Oh.
that's clear. That does not need to be on this. Great, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, anything, Bard?
I always recommend that we close with item 5, next steps.
Okay,
Yeah,
like, or conclusion, next steps, like what's our to-do list at the end of the entire thing?
Good idea.
because by the time we get to 5, there will be things that we will know that we don't know, we don't know.
I hope so.
It's very
What they
optimistic, David.
Anything on 4? So we've added 5. Do we need to add anything else?
David, one question for 4 is the overview of process and timelines. Because that's something that probably got homeowners' attention, like you're late already, right? So the temporal part of the process. So I would be inclined to say overview of process, including timelines or and timelines, something like that.
Right, we've heard that the state wants to see progress. But do we have that in writing? We'd hate to find out the hard way that no, there was a deadline, we didn't know about it.
Definition of progress.
That thing we didn't tell you about. Yeah.
Maybe that might be, or I think maybe we add that to number 3. Because I view number 3 as sort of the next sort of procedural steps to obtain coverage under permits. Maybe it's next steps and deadlines to obtain coverage under permit. Number 4, I was envisioning more, I talked to the engineer who's done a number of these. He can kind of explain better the engineering process. So like
Oh, I see.
deadlines aside, what does the engineering process look like on the ground? What does construction look like? So let's add the timeline to 3.
Yeah,
So, right, that's a more state timeline question, like what are our guardrails that we're all obligated to work under?
And then number 4, I thought 4 would be helpful just because when I talked to Andres, he had him sharing the process of how they look at each site, how they determine impervious, how they look at how it's already being treated to try to like minimize the amount of construction. I thought that was helpful, and I think people that live in the development would find that helpful to kind of understand the engineering process. Right, sorry. Depending on, no matter where this goes, I think just sort of understanding his process could be helpful, even if for some reason the state says, fine, you don't have to comply, 30 minutes to hear from Andres might be helpful.
Okay.
And somebody, mentioning the grant, somewhere in here is gonna pop up the question of funding, how does all this get paid for? And I don't know if that's premature at this meeting, but that's one we're gonna have to deal with at some point.
maybe that would be under next steps.
That's plausible to say next steps includes like, how's it gonna get paid for?
Next steps, timeline, funding.
Okay.
Grants.
Sarah, I see you have your hand up. Go ahead.
Push into existence.
Hi, yeah, I'm Sarah Heim. I'm also a resident of Southview. So I was actually raising my hand to ask about the funding question. So from my communications with folks at DEC, they did say that they were looking for funding opportunities to potentially help on the back end with the construction aspects. So obviously the ARPA grant was for the permit and the initial civil engineering study. But they did indicate that the state's looking into funding possibilities for sort of similar grants for the construction that has to happen later. And so I guess I'm just asking that maybe be part of the conversation if we have people there at the meeting from DEC about what is the state doing to potentially get funding to help with the cost of this. So not just sort of how we split the cost potentially between the town and the Southview residents, but also like, is there going to be other funding available potentially to help offset this?
So maybe that merits, this is Bart, of course, so maybe that merits something while they're there to like have a preliminary conversation about financing. State grants, and then locally, what are the methods? This is another conversation to have by which some property owners in town would be charged and others would not. Because we don't currently, I don't think, have a method of doing that.
Yeah, I think I would envision talking about the second thing you said about splitting the costs under item number 3. Sort of how do we obtain the permit? What do we do for splitting the costs?
Right.
What state funding is available? I don't know, but we want to put it in between 2 and 3. And then hopefully the folks here from the state have some ideas. If they don't, it could be a short agenda item and just add in the next steps.
Sarah, your hand's still up. Did you have more?
Nope, just didn't put it down yet. Sorry.
I don't understand.
The world we live in today.
I'll add a funding there between 2 and 3.
I guess Sarah sounds too much like that Apple name. All right. Anything else? Okay.
Then I do just want to circle back to the invite list. At the last meeting, it was invite the governor and everybody. So the folks who I have replies from, Terry Purcell and Brody Hankey from DEC, I think one or both of them will be attending the meeting. Town attorney Dave Rue, who's got a lot of experience in the cost splits, will be attending. Andres Torres from Watershed Consulting Engineers, he's going to be attending and he can help us out with the engineering side of it. Jana Brown, Richmond's representative to the State House, she said, I think she might be able to attend. And then we said maybe Dan Albrecht or Charlie Breaker. Well, Charlie can't attend, he says, but maybe Dan Albrecht, who's the stormwater guru at CCRPC, can hopefully attend. I can reach out to other levels, or do we want to start at this level with folks and then use that as escalation in the future?
I flaked out for just a second
Oh,
there. Did
sorry.
you mention our state senators?
I did not reach out to them. I talked to Jana Brown a bit and she
Tom
was very.
Shipton has often been kind of helpful,
Yeah.
cutting through bureaucracy.
Okay,
That's the
I can
suggestion.
invite him. Yeah, I did. That's up to you. I mean, I'll invite the governor on down,
Well, if
but
we get
there
one
might be an
fancy car
escalated
there, I can look at, he might-
way to go too.
Lieutenant Governor's driven my Cadillac.
Well, there's a point, I think, to be made, and Josh maybe implies this, for an escalated or graduated diplomatic response. Like, you don't start with nuclear weapons. You want to
Well, that's
like
one point of
have
the
like a
cards.
graduated sequence of things. You start here and then you escalate to several other steps.
So DEFCON.
Yes, yes, yeah.
But I can add Thomas
That's kind of
Chipman in. I think you're right. He's been very helpful in other things like this. So he might be a good one just to bring in early.
Could I interrupt for a second?
Go ahead. I was just about to call on you.
Thank you. So I have spoken to Thomas Chittenden. He is planning on attending, but it would be nice for him to get the official invite.
Absolutely.
Oh, there we go.
Thank you, June. And then I'll send out a letter tomorrow morning, now that we have an agenda. I'll keep it as a draft in case something comes up in the next few days. We can finalize it Friday, but I'll send the draft agenda with a letter to a list that town clerk Linda Parent has pulled, and that includes everybody in Southview, Hidden Pines, Mary Drive. I just want to try to get to everybody that got the letter from the state. Hopefully, I'm sure there'll be some missing properties, but we're making our best effort to get word out.
Oh, the governor did ride in my fire truck.
Bring them, park it out there and maybe they'll come in and have a look. Super nice.
Okay, so maybe that covers us for communication at this point.
Go
Or maybe
ahead.
there's more. Yeah, Daniel.
And Danielle Benoit, just to clarify what the Hidden Pines Mary Drive folks need to be included on as far as the agenda, it's really the top item number one, and then 2 down, aside from next steps, are really not applicable to those less than 3 acre sites, because this is a discussion for a greater than 3 acre site. Okay,
Yep.
thank you.
Okay, are we ready to move on?
Is there anything else you guys wanted to, just one last shot?
Just trying to know
No,
what I
thank you.
need to be a part of here.
That
Thank
was
you
very-
so
Very
much.
helpful, thank you.
Yeah, we're all figuring this out together, so thank you for
I've
your
learned a
patience.
lot.
Thank you for your patience, seriously.
We have
So for years, we have been after V-Trans to do
I
something
think we need to,
with the traffic signal at the
David,
intersection.
I think we need to make a motion to actually hold the meeting.
Oh, yeah,
Oh, that's right.
sure.
Thank you,
Just
Alex.
consider.
I move we actually hold the meeting next week, Monday, September 23rd, 2024, at the library if we can manage it, starting at 7 PM
Adam,
Including a virtual.
and including Zoom.
Yeah.
said Adam second. So the actually is doing a lot of work there. Okay, I'm gonna actually hold the meeting, not just
Yeah.
theoretically, probably,
Were invites mentioned?
likely. Sorry.
What's that?
How did we, I know we talked about invites. How have we reached
Oh,
out to
yeah.
everybody affected property wise?
So Linda, I gave Linda that map that we had at the last meeting, and it still includes Hidden Pines and Mary Drive. She was able to generate mailing labels for
Okay.
everybody up there.
Perfect.
So I've got the mailing labels on my desk. I got a short letter that says attaches a draft agenda. We'll see you next Monday. Final agenda will be posted on Friday.
Good.
And,
I'm
we
getting a
have to- we-
cardboard form as well.
yeah, of course, yeah, put it for push one. We still have to finalize the exact location. But yeah, we'll get word out tomorrow and then through our normal channels on Friday as we would for a regular select board meeting.
Any further discussion? Hearing none, motion has been made to have the special select board meeting to address the stormwater issue and permitting at Southview, next Monday, a week from tonight,
At 7 PM
at 7 PM.
at the library if we can manage it.
At the library, if we can manage it. Calling the motion to a vote, please identify yourself and signify your vote.
Adam, I.
Lisa, aye.
Bard, I.
David, aye. Oh, sorry. David, aye. Okay, moving on to item C, discussion of the traffic signal at the intersection of Bridge Street and Route 2. For years, the town has been in discussion with V-Trans about changing that light. And the bad news was always that light is so old, we can't change it. It is what it is. So the good news is with the repaving of Route 2, they have updated the traffic light to modern traffic light standards. So the good news is it is changeable. The bad news is it's changeable. So Josh, why don't you give us a bit of an update on what the complaints have been, what you've done, how the meetings went, and where we are and why?
Sure. So last week, Adam and I met with Derek Lyman from V-Trans up at the traffic signal. I think it was on Tuesday morning, to sort of look at how does it work during that rush hour between 7:30 and 8, and what adjustments could be made to make it work. So a couple of things about the signal, as David alluded to, it's partially controlled by cameras, which monitor how much traffic is backed up on each road. So basically, V-Trans sets a maximum and says it can be green for up to 30 seconds on this area. If the cameras in the radar see, oh, there's no traffic there after 10 seconds, it'll shut the green off and switch to the next signal. So it's partially controlled. Basically, what he does is set these maximums. And before we get into what we talked about, there was a question, I think, going back to when they first installed it about, well, should the left-hand turn arrow come on at the beginning of the green signal versus the end? And Derek said, well, the reason why it comes on at the end is that when you engage the crosswalk, the walk signal comes on, everything goes to red. So you have 10 seconds while it's all red to make your crossing. And people will still be in the crosswalk when it comes back to green. And if you had that left-hand turn arrow, I think drivers sort of see that green and go, I can go left.
Yeah.
Rather than just a straight green, which still gives them some caution heading into the crosswalk. So that explanation made sense. As we looked at the way it was set up for Bridge Street and Jericho Road have a green light maximum of 35 seconds. There was an additional 10 seconds for left-hand turn arrow, which Derek said was probably only ever activated at about 5 seconds in the morning between 7:30 and 8. So while we were there, he upped that to 25 seconds. And as it cycled through 3 or 4 times, it ran for the full 25 seconds. And there were 11 cars exactly that made it through when that was dedicated, which was great because sometimes you get to green, you get a car go straight and you have a car sitting there trying to make a left for the next 20 seconds while it's on. And then once that arrow comes on, boom, you get your traffic moving forward. So that really seemed to move cars through a lot quicker. He kept it that way. He said it that way. So on Friday morning, I went out and stood in front of the town center and watched for traffic. At no point did traffic get backed up beyond the town center building. And in the past, it had been over the bridge, back around the corner a little bit. It was just one day. I'll do a couple other days. What I did notice was that the bus really holds things up. So the bus comes in, the one that stops in front of the library, and there's cars backing up as it lets the kids on, and then it drives up 100 yards and stops at the railroad track, and more cars backing up. Meanwhile, the light's completely clear. So when it gets up there, it takes 2 or 3 cycles to clear through, but that's when we started to see, like, there was like 15 or 20 cars backed up behind the bus, and that's when the choke point starts to come up, and that was around 7:35, 7:40. But even that, with the longer signal, it started to clear through a little bit better. So we're gonna leave it at the longer signal. And I think that will help. We'll continue to monitor it and see what happens. Before we get to the audible beacon for the crosswalk, are there any questions about the traffic signal?
Nope, it sounds like you made some tweaks that help.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
When we talked to Derek and it sounded like we're kind of based on that intersection, the way the traffic is going to be compromised, but
Yeah.
pretty good compromise right now.
Yeah, and the other thing is, as we looked at Route 2, they were never backed up more than like 6 or 7 cars.
Yeah.
So and that could change too as the construction project wraps up. If people start coming down this road more, Adam noted that sometimes they'll hold traffic for one lane. So all of a sudden you get a big slug of cars coming down in the morning. So, in 6 weeks when that bridge opens, it could be different. but
You know, if
they're
we just built the
super.
monorail, this would be so easy.
Yeah, I just got back from Disney World. The monorails were great.
Florida's completely flat.
Florida's completely flat, but monorails actually,
Rails would be great.
monorails are
Invented two rails.
extremely expensive.
Oh, I know.
No, but I mean, just reading some of the history of Disney World, when they build those things.
Did you see the Simpsons episode?
Yeah, oh, yeah, of course. I know the reference. It's a great reference. So the audible beacon, unfortunately, there's less we can do there. That is set by ADA standards, and it's in the MUTCD book for traffic control devices. And basically what that does is it listens to, so the beacon is there so that a visually impaired person will be able to find the crosswalk button when they're approaching the intersection. Without the beacon, they wouldn't be able to like go right to that post. So that's why it's continuously beeping. It's not broken. It continuously beeps as long as that traffic signal is going. I think the traffic signal turns off at 11, from 11 till 6 in the morning. It says flashing yellow, flashing red. There is no beeping overnight, but while it's operational, it does beep. It listens to the ambient sound and it goes 5 decibel levels above ambient sound to alert people that this is where it is. So it modulates throughout the day, but unfortunately, because it's in the codes, we can't just turn it off. And it is the standard for all new traffic signals. So some of the older traffic signals, if you go into Burlington or other places, you may not hear it. But the newer ones you will. And I think who was I talking to said, oh, I think it was Linda. I was just in Williston and I heard the traffic signal. It was beeping because it was a newer traffic signal. So unfortunately, there's not much relief for those that are in office buildings nearby.
And I think Derek had indicated that if it was an issue for for a specific reason, safety or like a homeowner or something, and there was no known visually impaired person, kind of tweak things, but we do have someone who is visually impaired that uses these specific crosswalks, and kind of is what it is.
Yeah.
I think the threshold was that your person is supposed to hear the beep and go towards the crosswalk from 10 feet away.
Yeah.
With ambient traffic there, and we were standing there, and there was cars next to us, and about 10 feet away, you can start to hear the beep and follow it. It's working as it's supposed to.
Cool. Thanks for doing that.
It's protecting
Good to know.
visually impaired people.
Well, intersections by design regulate compromise, so.
Yep.
Anything else on the traffic signal? Josh, let's talk about speed limits and trucks on town roads.
Okay. So let's see.
Julie Thorpe, who's one of the people who had been asking about this, is on the call.
You want to, I mean, I sort of have some things specific to Heinsberg Road if you want.
Yeah, Julie, do you want to go ahead and kind of share your concerns?
Sure. I stopped over a few neighbors' homes today too, and just kind of got their input, and a few are here with us, Lauren and Dan, Julie Waite, I think perhaps Michael. Yes, hi. So we have had kind of a consistent problem with just the Jake brakes, the noise level, and the speed at which a lot of the trucks are driving. Granted, I sit on my front porch and my house literally shakes to some of them. And I've been here 21 years and it's never really been quite this bad. So I know that the white lines were painted. I do think I saw some speed strips to try. I don't know what they were for. They were the black lines that go over the road. They were there briefly. I don't know if that's some attempt at helping something. I know if I do call the Heinsberg police, they do send someone over. I know they had someone there on Sunday, but Sundays really don't help with the majority of the speed, because I think that happens. And Lauren and Dan can kind of chime in, and Julie, I think the majority of the problems are in the morning during the rush hour and after 3 o'clock, maybe between 3 and 6. It's kind of a speedway over here. So I was just curious where things were on a possible speed study. I know we had talked about that last year in the fall.
So I know we moved forward with a speed study on Huntington Road recently, but you said you saw the tubes there recently?
I thought I did. I think, but they were there so briefly because I was out of town and I came back and I think I saw them there, but I'm not 100% sure.
They're usually only in place for about 7 days and they do the speed study. So it's I don't recall, I know we moved forward with one on Huntington Road. I saw the tubes there this summer. They always that report. I know they know they're late. They're getting that. That was Huntington Road where Hinesburg Road comes into Huntington Road. I don't recall that we did an updated speed study on Hinesburg Road because we just had one on Hinesburg Road a couple of years ago, which did reduce the speed limit from 45 to 40.
Yeah,
I
I don't.
CCRPC to see if they did another speed study or if they would recommend doing another one because, again, we did one in 21.
To Julie's point, though, things have gotten significantly worse very recently.
Well, I can ask if they would, I'll ask if they can do another one. I don't know what the ability is. The last one from a couple years ago was pretty thorough, but if there's new conditions, then they can look at that.
Yeah, and it's not really that steep of a decline. So the Jake breaks are quite intense too. And I know other towns are struggling with this as well with Jake breaks. That one of the neighbors said he, used to work and drive trucks, and he said he doesn't see any reason why someone would need their Jake brakes right there. But the trucks that are coming too, I can't weigh them, but they definitely seem extremely large and possibly overweight. I don't know if all of them get permits. I don't really know how that affects the structure of the roads themselves. I know we all know that issue happened at Faye's Corner, which was kind of a bit of a different situation, but it is a very dangerous intersection. And I think if the speed limit's 40, and people would go 40, I think we'd be fine. I think now it's a matter of enforcement.
Yeah, so I guess a couple of things to touch on with the engine brakes. I've done some research with VLCT. You really can't prohibit Jake brakes. So any signs that are put up are sort of a suggestion, advisory, and they're not enforceable. The town roads, as far as weight limits, the weight limit on town roads is 24,000 pounds. Anything 26,000 and above is a commercial vehicle and doesn't need a permit to operate. They go through our highway department to get those permits, and he's got a file for every year for the permits. Maximum weight is.
Question on the first thing you said, though. You said that the Jake brake signs are not enforceable, but you're okay to put them up. Because I was told I couldn't put them up.
We could put them up. We could it has to be phrased like, please be considerate, don't use Jake brakes. But you can't ticket them for using them.
And the town, the board could make a motion to put up Jake brakes. Sometimes unenforceable signs, you kind of steer away from because you can't enforce them. But if it's the will of the select board to put up Jake brake signs in that area, I think we could do that, but it would not be enforceable. It'd have to be advisory, like a please.
Julie, to your point though about a private landowner cannot put up a sign without complying with a sign ordinance, and the sign ordinance doesn't let people put up very big signs, but the town and its traffic control devices can do things private landowners can't.
My suggestion is if we're going to contemplate signs that we should include the highway department and the police chief in that conversation.
Can ask them for their opinion.
About their opinion about efficacy and, utility and the issues of enforcement. And as you observe, putting up signs that don't mean anything, does that have a deleterious effect? Now I ignore all these signs because I can, or I do. I had another question. It's not lost on any of us that our police department staffing is slim. Is it possible or plausible to try to contract with the sheriff's department for targeted speed enforcement?
So I know when we tried that on Cochrane Road, we got nowhere a couple of years ago. Yeah. But I did talk with Chief Cambridge last week about it, and he said the best thing to do is when there's certain times of day, he knows those times of day, he can get somebody out there. So now that, I hear Julie saying it's mostly that morning rush hour, so probably that 7 to 8 hour when the lights backed up, and 3 to 6 p.m. in the evening, I'll relay that to Chief Cambridge, and I think, he'll be able to get people out there to do some speed enforcement during those times.
Lauren and Dan, go ahead.
Thank you all for just doing this meeting. Yeah, we're thankful for Julie for roping us in on this. Yeah, we noticed we're right by Face Corner, and what happens is the trucks, they will Jake brake coming down to slow down, which is good to go around Face Corner. Because there's been a lot of problems there in the past. But the issue is they're just using their Jake brakes on a very slight incline. There's really nothing. I mean,
For a long time.
Yeah, it's very extended, and you know, it's yes, maybe they're going a bit too fast, but it's mostly just an unnecessary thing. I would second the motion that, you know, I understand it's not enforceable, but if you put up a residential area, you know, no, don't use your engine braking, you know, your Jake brake. You know, I think those signs might actually do something, just, you know, because A, they'll be new, and B, if you put up a couple of them on each side, you know, that's kind of the main issue. But it's not like a steep hill, and honestly, I wouldn't mind if they did use their Jake brake in an emergency. You know, something's wrong with it. Obviously, yeah, we don't want any accidents, but you know, just as a default measure to not use those would be, you know, super. As Julie said, you know, you feel like the house shaking, you know, because it's so loud. And yeah, we're a little bit closer to Faye's Corner than her, and you know, it's not like it lets up after her house. It just continues. So
there's really two issues. It's the speed and the
but yeah, that's just our 2 cents. So if you can put in those signs, you know, even if regardless of their enforceability, I think, you know, we would appreciate it.
Are you hearing Jake breaks like during sleeping times or times when it should be quiet?
We heard them at like almost 9 p.m. just a couple nights ago.
Occasionally, yes, but
it's mostly though during
rush hour
times, like Julie said.
It's the dump trucks especially. We've got video of them, just the comic videos of them just rolling through, just you know.
Yeah, there's a lot of fill area or something.
Yeah,
I don't know where they're getting.
I mean, it's a through way. They need to get through, but you know, to lay on.
I'm just speculating here. I mean, I live on Kenyon Road, but I go through Faye's Corners. I'm just speculating that we might be seeing an increase in loaded dump trucks with flooding and road repairs. But just an observation. Bard?
It's possible.
That is going to be
yeah.
my point, that I know that the town itself has purchased a lot of sand, gravel, etc.
From Heinsberg.
And from Heinsberg. So we could predict there is a much higher volume of dump trucks than usual going from Heinsberg into Richmond under contract with the town of Richmond.
Yeah.
I'll ask the police chief and road foreman what their opinion is and come back to the board with their advice on that. And I think
that was much worse, like let's say in the early spring, like after the majority of the flooding. I felt like the dump trucks were the majority of the problem, but interdispersed in that are just tandem, like huge tandem logging trucks and trucks that are just barreling. So it's, you know, I know that I always tried to understand that with the flooding, they had to get their product from one place to another with the sand pit on Kenyon. And then now hearing there's one there, it makes sense that that's kind of the dump truck freeway. But it's so our home, like this is where we live, and I can't sit on my front porch anymore. And I know some other neighbors complained of that as well, that there's no more sitting on the front porch after 3 o'clock, literally. So,
you know, and then just thinking more about the speed tubes that you observed, we are doing a safety audit of Faye's Corners. So those tubes might be for that safety audit. We have a meeting with them, I think, next week or the week after on site. But part of that audit probably is looking at speed heading into that intersection. But I'll ask them again if they can update the speed study. And it did cover that area. I think it went all the way, I think it might have covered the entire road, but they reduced the speed limit, maybe not the entire road, but they reduced the speed limit from Heinsberg, from the intersection with Huntington Road, all the way around. I think it's about a half mile south of Mansfield Way intersection. So they covered a good amount of it. Yeah, it came through and around Faye's Corners though.
But not very far up.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, the speed limit reduction didn't go very far up.
No.
No, but I think they studied it, but I'll review it and ask.
Bard?
I'm just, you know, I'm sorry I didn't research this before the meeting, but I'm looking at the Agency of Transportation's FAQs for just informational purposes. While some towns do install such signs on roads under their jurisdiction, we do not install engine brake prohibition signs on state highways, and we discourage towns from doing so on their highways. Engine brakes are a legal and necessary safety device. I only mention it because it appears that the Agency of Transportation has a perspective, which may or may not influence our thinking or actions.
One other stupid idea I have, and that's kind of my specialty. If we know that sand and gravel are being hauled by certain companies, could we contact those companies and ask them?
We could.
Yeah.
Can they enforce it? Will they
There
run
are
it
a
more than a
lot.
week or so? Probably not, but it doesn't hurt to try.
To ask,
It's a
yeah.
condition of our purchase.
And I think realistically,
There are a lot of different
a
companies.
fully loaded,
Yeah, that's why it's a stupid idea, but
fully loaded dump truck coming down Heinsberg Road.
They're gonna hear
Brake
Jake
is
brake.
that's the exact usage scenario where
Yeah.
they can manage their speed and not use their brakes, so they keep their brakes cool, so that if there's an
So they
emergency,
work
they have
on it.
brakes still, and the
Yeah.
Jake brake's not there to.
Are Jake brakes needed when you go over like under 35, 38 miles an hour?
Yeah, it's completely independent of speed. They try to use
Yeah.
the Jake brake to scrub as much speed as possible, so the brakes are cold, because the regular brakes in the truck, if they get hot, don't work, unlike a
Right.
car.
I mean, it's interesting because I see so many and I'm becoming like kind of obsessed with it a little bit, unfortunately. But a lot of them don't use their Jake brakes. So where does that logic come in? I see many go by and they're not using them.
I think the distinction is that a lot of them, you don't know they're using the Jake brake, because the newer designs are quieter and are pre-muffler, and the older designs are there's like an engine brake and exhaust brake, and they do the same thing. So
Yeah.
fire trucks have exhaust brakes specifically so we don't make a ton of noise, but they're a little bit less effective. So there's a bunch of different designs, but they kind of all accomplish the same thing. So just because it might not be loud, but they're still using them. So
I just think if they knew that that is like, they're not even thinking that it's a residential area. They just aren't. It's not even their fault in a sense. So I think some signs about it being a residential area, please slow down, kind of quiet neighborhood. It's our home. It might work. I just was unsure of what signs to
Yeah.
put up.
yeah, it might at least help in the early morning and late in the evening. Hopefully, might be
As-
optimistic.
As the Jake brakes, the sound will vary depending on, as Adam said, the type of brake and also the weight of the vehicle and the speed of the vehicle. So a very loaded vehicle
The attitude
going
of the
30
driver.
miles an hour can make a lot of noise with a Jake brake.
Mhm.
Gene, go ahead.
I agree with Adam 100%. We have dump trucks going down West White Hill all day long, and they use their Jake brake because, or the engine brake, because if they use their regular brakes, they'd heat up, and by the time they got to the bottom of West White Hill, they wouldn't have any brakes. And so really the Jake brake or the engine brake is used to slow the vehicle down without heating up the regular brakes, so those large trucks don't lose their brakes. I mean, we had a dump truck lose their brakes coming down West White Hill many, many years ago, and they just went flying right out into the field. It's
Yep.
not a good thing. So maybe if you lower the speed limit as you're approaching the curve, that might help, but they're still going to use their brakes to slow down, or their Jake brake to slow down. I don't think you're going to be able to stop it. That's my 2 cents.
Ultimately, it's the speed, and West White Hill and our road are total, like our road is basically flat in a sense. Like it really is. Coming south of my house, there's a little bit of a decline, but for the most part, Faye's Corner, that whole area is flat. But I understand what you're saying. It's just, I think the main issue is the speed and the speed of the trucks.
Yeah.
I would find that a sign that says entering residential area would have more effect than saying no Jake brakes.
Yeah.
Also, it strikes me that the
But-
concern isn't the actual use of engine brakes and Jake brakes. It's the use of engine brakes and Jake brakes by trucks that make a lot of noise when they're doing it. And there is a threshold we can hold them to, right, legally. There is a DOT threshold. And so Vermont DOT, if they are staffed and willing, could enforce that.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm guessing that number isn't as low as everyone on the road would hope, but I hear trucks go by my house where it's not hilly on Route 2, and I know some of them are far exceeding that. And when you look at the truck and the amount of chrome in the shape of the exhaust, it's by design.
Yeah.
Accidental.
Yes.
There's no rust there. It's a calculated choice. We might be able to request if it's a consistent enough schedule where it's violated, that the T come and do some actual enforcement.
Yeah.
Because realistically, truckers are not gonna, local police isn't going to be able to do that stuff, but DOT is set up to do that specifically.
And it is possible, I'm speculating here, that the please be courteous about Jake brake use signs, if people saw those before the, oh my God, I need to slow down, face corners are coming, that might reduce the noise level.
So to be continued with.
Yep.
Invite the other folks in.
Yeah, one more last thing I'll just wrap up is, I wanted to put signs up. I was just never sure where I was allowed to put them. Just like the residential, please slow down, we live here. I wasn't sure if I had to put those on my frontage property or if I could put them on the actual, I don't think the speed limit sign to say, please slow down, or what we could do as a community or a neighborhood to make people, I know in Moscow Road, there was a skeleton with a sign that said, this is our neighborhood, and it drew my attention. And it was, I just don't know what the town of Richmond allows as far as signage, personal, that we would put up.
Well, it's in the, if you go to the if you go to the Richmond website and you go to ordinances, it's part of the sign ordinance. And it's right there. It's pretty straightforward. A sign on your land has to comply, no matter what the sign says, has to comply with the sign ordinance. As far as a sign on the public right of way, that can be whatever we want it to say. We have greater latitude than a landowner does.
Right, I think the general rule is that the landowners can't put a sign in the right of way, which is 10-ish feet off the edge of the road, give or take, depending on where you're at, maybe less than 10 feet.
Okay, so we have a couple things to follow up on. Thanks for bringing this to our attention. If we don't hear it, we don't know about it.
And we certainly do sympathize about the idea that you can't sit on your porch because you're in a free fire zone, so to speak.
Yeah. All right, well, some things to look into and back.
So I appreciated the irony of Jay telling us that fire trucks can't make a lot of noise.
So I do have a couple of things to add to this.
Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Adam.
Jay.
When we did the speed study for Heinsberg Road, it was primarily from Faye's Corners to the Huntington Road. And the dynamic, and you'll know this as well as anybody, David, that from the Heinsberg town line to Faye's Corners it might as well be a different road.
Yeah.
Because it has a completely different characteristics and where people go and how they do it. We have certainly had an increase in truck traffic this summer for obvious reasons, and frankly, speed for quite a portion of the summer wasn't a problem up near me because we only had half a road. The two sections of, because I travel this road a lot, the two sections that are problematic as far as Jake brakes are closer to the Heinsberg town line, going right by my house, where there is there's a curve that's quite dangerous if you're going too fast. You know, I appreciate why they're using Jake brakes, but I do think there are many trucks that go too fast. And I would note that the town trucks are not the problem.
Really?
No, the town trucks do not use their Jake brakes. Maybe they have better equipment, I don't know. But pretty much every town in this part of Chittenden County comes by there at one time or another because they're going to Heinsberg gravel.
Yeah.
I would, and I advocated for this a couple of years ago, I would really love to see a speed study on our section of Heinsberg Road. I think it's just as the 40-mile-an-hour speed limit is just as necessary on our portion as it is on the lower portion of Heinsberg Road. And the two trouble points really are up near my house.
And then down near Mansfield Way.
And down near Mansfield's Way. Those are the two, and going towards Faye's Corner, there's a good reason for slowing down.
Right.
We don't have a house there anymore because somebody didn't slow down enough.
Yeah.
So I just point out, I know that most of my neighbors would really appreciate a speed study, and I know that takes a while to get going.
But I agree, it's apples and oranges to say the speed between Faye's Corners and Huntington Road should support this. That's not the straightaway going downhill. That's where people are just like.
And I would note that when you're coming from Heinsberg, the speed limit goes up. The Heinsberg Road, the Richmond, the Richmond.
Speed limit goes up as you
Pittsburgh
cross
to
the border.
Richmond, and when you cross the border, it's 35 miles an hour, and as soon as you cross the border, you wouldn't know that there was a different road, but it becomes 45.
And that
And
just
it's the
makes
same
no
with
sense.
Jericho, right?
Right. It should be 35 the whole way, but we
should
just
be
have to
30.
prove it, but
You know, and in my understanding, the 35 in Heinsberg was done by the road commissioner decades ago, and he just waited it out. But,
Cars would go back home.
it worked.
Well, you know how when you drive, if you don't see speed limit sign, your mind just kind of knows based on the character of the road, what the speed limit
Yeah.
probably is.
Yeah, that's actually part of the study.
Yeah, and there's that whole 85% thing, but I think if that road there is a 35 mile, my brain thinks that should be a 35 mile an hour road.
There's no
Really
shoulder,
should be.
there's no sight distance.
Right.
And I'm so sorry, I don't know how to raise my hand on here. But last time we spoke, or last time I attended a meeting, they said that they put the white lines there and then they would do the speed study because the white lines tended to drop the speed and the state of Vermont will set the speed 5 miles below the speed that people are going. So the issue was that you guys were saying that we'll put the white lines first and then we're gonna do a speed study on Heinsberg Road. That was my understanding, but maybe I misunderstood.
Stuck with that.
Well,
Makes
I
sense.
certainly want to do one, and if we can start the ball rolling, if it takes a while, you know.
All right. Thank you, everyone. Josh, you want to give us an update on flood recovery and flood related discussions?
Sure. So Pete Goslin provided a memo, road foreman, about the roads that have been repaired. Every road has been repaired to two-way traffic. And I think all the contractors are done. He does still have some work to be done on Stage Road, Snipe Island, Heinsberg Road, Besaw, Mountain View Drive, and Dugway Road that he's going to do with his town crew before we get to winter. In addition to that work, he's going to be pricing out a 10-foot diameter culvert for Hillview Road. So that's the one break in the road that has not yet been completed. Yeah.
At one point, we were expecting that maybe we needed a bridge up.
So, right. So, but then Pete had actually looked at that and said, well, it was a culvert before and he'd like to get it open, I think, before winter for plowing
And a bridge will
purposes
take
and for
longer.
school. So he's priced out a culvert. He got a price of $37,000. He thinks it'll be an additional $20,000 to rent the excavator needed to get in there. And I think some additional materials. So think of it as, what are they? About
The cost of the bridge.
so it would be about $60,000, I think, give or take, to have the town crew buy the materials and repair that and get that open before winter. I think we could still pursue a bridge. We have it in as a hazard mitigation grant program option. We could still talk to FEMA about their mitigation program as well. I think Pete wanted me to ask you guys that because he got the estimate this afternoon. Do you want him to move forward with that repair? And I think the downside would be we could put that $60,000 in and then tear it out in 2 years to put a bridge in. But if we wait for a bridge, it could be another year or more before we figure out funding and get the bridge in.
I don't think it makes sense to wait for a bridge because we need the road open.
I would say from a little bit different perspective, from the fire department's perspective.
Yeah.
We would want that
Open.
that road open again. There's been a few instances where we've had fires on that section of Huntington Road, and that allows us to get around. So we
Okay.
want that open too.
All right, we'll tell Pete to move forward. And that will be covered by FEMA in the normal process because it's repairing it to original conditions. And then we'll continue to explore a bridge.
Is there any option to upsize it all pending the bridge, assuming that next July 11th, we're gonna get another flood?
Well, I'm not sure. Pete usually, at least for the smaller ones, tries to go like one size up, and the state regulations seem to back that up, and FEMA
Big
has.
enough that it's not
I don't know. I'm not sure. It means 10 feet. I don't know what one size up from 10 feet is.
11 feet.
But yeah, but Pete's usually pretty good about trying to, figure it out, or maybe like better armor it somehow. He's usually thinking those through.
Awesome.
Outside of flood work, he is going to install a plant mix on the north side of East Main Street for the sidewalk. That was supposed to be made out of concrete this summer, but we didn't have a chance to do that. But it will be in better condition than it is right now. If you've walked it, it's pretty rugged right now. It's getting overgrown, but he's going to get that to a point where it can be cleared in the winter for snow. I know there are residents up there that use it frequently that are getting frustrated with the condition, but he'll get it into a better condition before winter. That project will most likely then proceed towards concrete next spring. And he's also going to be doing some berming on driveways. That the sidewalk is going to help raise the level to keep stormwater out of some of these driveways. As a temporary fix, he'll do that before the winter, so to kind of get people through the winter and then have a permanent fix in the spring.
Might ask them to quiet down.
I can go do it, sure.
So that's highway. We also had a visit from the Emergency Watershed Protection Program last week. Lynn spent 2 days with them, visited about 40 sites on Tuesday and Wednesday. Her initial feedback was that they feel about 12 sites will actually qualify for funding, and they'll be issuing a letter in the next couple of weeks with a formal decision on each individual site.
12 out of 40.
12 out of 40. Well, I mean, we took some long shots too. You know, there's a specific thing that they're able to cover. It's basically if a stream or a river is having bank erosion, it is imminently threatening a structure or like a septic tank. So if you've got a stream that's overflowing your property, but it's 100 yards from your house, they're not going to cover that because it's not imminently threatening your property. So we'll see what the responses are. We can always ask for more details on any that they deny. Any that are approved, it'll be the 25% cost coverage where they'll cover 75%. The sponsor covers 25%. The sponsor would technically be the town, but in the two that we're currently underway with engineering on, we're passing those, those are covered 100%. We would have an agreement in place to pass that 25% along to the homeowner. So similar to other conversations we've had, the town doesn't have a budget to pay for private improvements.
Right.
We continue to get updates from FEMA about reaching out to private homeowners for FEMA individual assistance. Duncan's been doing a great job of keeping the website updated with that and also putting out information on Front Porch Forum. And then speaking of Duncan, he and Lynn put together a nice map that I'll share. I didn't get this till today, so it wasn't in the packet. We can put it in future updates. This is a look at the elevation and buyout program interest. So it's sort of in 6 different areas around town. Green is interested in buyout, blue is interested in elevation, and yellow is homes that are interested in both. So you'll see right down here in the village, we've got Esplanade Street here and some on Bridge Street. This is Johnny Brook. This is just over the bridge. I think this is what road is that? Is it Old Browns Court? Yeah, Old Browns Court. This is out towards Snipe Island Road. This is closer to Jones Mill. And then this is on Cochrane Road. But there was an interest in sort of where are the parcels located? What are they looking at? So this is what we've got right now. And as some of those ones in yellow will need to make up their mind in the next month or so and submit an application, we'll keep the map updated.
I have a very stupid question. Why would Brown's Court, which is way up on a hill, be needing a buyout or elevation?
Sorry, not Brown's Court, Brooklyn Court.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
My bad. I did misspeak. Yeah, I was trying to sort of grasp the name. I know some of those houses definitely got water in their basements.
Oh, sure.
Each flood. But yeah, no, not Brown's Court. Sorry.
I was like,
No, I definitely misspoke. It was Brooklyn.
Silly question. How could a property be eligible for a buyout and an elevation?
So
You'd be eligible for both,
There-
right? But you'd have to pick
you
one
just
or
can't
the
have
other.
both. You have
Oh,
to pick.
you have to
okay.
pick. Yeah, and so some of them are sort of exploring the options, seeing what's going to be better for them and their families.
You kind of pursue both right up till the
Decision point.
Yeah, and like sort of, so they all have the pre-applications in, and now the state's looking for more information. Some of them may actually not qualify for one, but qualify for the other. So they're working through that process to see where they want to go. I think the state really only wants one actual application from each property, but there's some preliminary work to be done.
Okay.
they can all keep an eye on the houses for sale in town.
Yeah.
You want to pursue
That's
the
just
buyout.
it. You take the
Yeah.
buyout,
Yeah.
where are you gonna go?
So,
Yeah.
Is this document posted?
It is not yet. I just got it this afternoon from Duncan, but I can post it.
I think it's worth posting as associated.
Yeah.
But if they buy out, they have to remove the house and leave it, we have to leave it as open space, right?
Right.
Yeah, as Kara mentioned at the last meeting, there's some things you can do with that land, but
Like
it's.
you can put it in a swing set.
Stuff like that.
Not
Yeah.
at
You
all.
couldn't buy another, you couldn't put another house there. You couldn't put a garage there. I think it could be parking. It could be a dog park. You know, there's some small things you can do. for it.
Solar array,
What's that?
we put a solar array in there.
A solar array. As long as there's a monorail coupled with solar array, I
As long
think
as you
you're
don't live
good.
under it.
No, I don't, well, actually, I mean, solar array, I'm not gonna say yes, or maybe you could. Cause I mean, it's just a post, but
Probably
it
not.
counts, yeah, so then probably
Construction.
not, so, all right. So that is my flood update.
Thank you.
Before this past July one, the state was offering to map for 75% FEMA grant with a 25% state match. I don't know if they still have the money for that, but.
So that's for the EWP program or for the elevations?
Elevations.
Yes, so everybody that's on the list for an elevation, it will be covered at 100%.
Also
the
have buyout.
Well, the buyout, there's no cost to the homeowner because you have to qualify for a certain threshold. As long as the threshold is covered and approved, then they buy it out at the appraised value or the value that it is determined to have been prior to the flood, and plus some money to demolish and return it to the green space. So there's really no money laid out by the homeowner in a buyout scenario. But the elevation, there was always a 25% match, and the state is covering that for any qualified properties.
Excellent.
Yeah.
That's good news.
Yeah. Moving costs.
Okay, we've got an hour till 9:40.
Right.
9:44 we're aiming for, right?
We don't want to follow in Amtrak's footsteps. Let's keep moving.
Next is consideration of the warning for a special town meeting to be held on Saturday, November 9th, 2024.
Okay.
You want to bring up?
Yeah, I'll bring up the draft there. Find that up.
You were into strange forms.
Okay. So. So ran this by our attorney, as I was looking for some of his advice. He didn't make a ton of changes to Article 1 or 2. He did note that we could say secret paper ballot. Linda had a concern that paper ballot might bring up the idea of calling for a paper ballot at a town meeting, but secret paper ballot, hopefully that explains better what an Australian ballot is. Article 3, he said that we could make that, he brought up the idea of we could make it less specific and just say like basically a capital reserve fund. I opted to keep the specificity in here because if we did that, then the board could set up a policy that would basically name the ARPA uses. But the problem with the policy is if in 5 years the select board at that point says, you know what, we do want to spend it on a fire truck, they could change the policy and spend it on a fire truck. So I left the specificity in here. This is based on what the ARPA committee came up with. It's sort of like trying to hit the bullet points to put that restriction on it by the voters, because it seemed to me that the intent of the voters in the select board was to keep this very focused on the ARPA uses. And then if it was ever to be changed in the future, it would have to go back to the voters. So if there's ever a balance, the voters could then say, nope, we will use it for something else. But I kept the specificity in there. If the board wants to change that, we can talk about it. Article 4 really remains unchanged to transfer sort of the balance of the ARPA money into that fund. There's one other thing I wanted to say about this. Oh, as far as warning, we have to file, if we wanted to have this on November 9th, which is what Linda and town moderator Clint Buxton recommend. That's the Saturday after the general election. Linda's a little busy until the general election. November 9th, both Clint and Linda are available. If we want to do that, we have to warn it at the October 7th meeting. That would give us our 30-day window of warning by about 4 days. I am still trying to figure out the exact location, the community room over at the library. We could be in there, but only until 11 o'clock when they have another function coming in. You might be able to push that to 11:30. Gives us 2 hours, which I'd like to hope would be enough, but you never really know with some of these things. It could go longer. I got a message into the Kemmel Summit Middle School. They're looking to see if they can host us. Their challenge is they have to have a staff member on site whenever there's something going on. So they're looking into that. So hopefully in 3 weeks, when we have our next meeting, I'll have a location for you.
Okay.
Questions, comments, thoughts?
My one question, I know we had talked a few different times about, including language in any new reserve funds and possibly existing reserve funds going forward to allow those monies to be used to cover cash flow short term for emergency situations? Does that need to be included in this article, or is that something that we could make a policy that it's included in all reserve funds and so it would automatically be included in this?
That is a good question. I'll have to follow up. I don't know.
Jean has her hand up.
So does Linda. Jean, go ahead.
Yeah, my question is, how many people can the library hold?
Depends on how deep you stack them. No, I don't know.
Don't be
I don't
funny,
know.
Jay Fur.
Yeah, no, I don't know the answer. I know that the last time we had a special meeting about the date of town meeting, the library seemed to suffice on a Saturday morning.
There are packed quite a few people in there. I have a photo of it I could count.
But
I'm
No, I think
guessing
more than that.
50-ish.
Let me pull up the photo.
Linda, go ahead.
Yeah, I did mention it in the chat, but part of the legal description of an Australian ballot is that it's pre-printed. We don't want people to think that they're just going to be able to still attend a meeting and make changes and just write yes or no on a piece of scrap paper.
Good point.
So add the
And
word
if you-
pre-printed to secret paper ballot.
sure. I'm thinking we could also just say, see dictionary for definition of Australian ballot in parentheses. But I think I'm being a little snide. I think, yeah, pre-printed secret paper ballot, I think would that work for you, Linda? Does that hopefully address the concern?
Yeah, I think it
Okay.
would. Thank you.
Well, thank you. And thanks for that. I don't mean to make light of it, but it just, as we try to define Australian ballot.
Right. I just don't want people to
Pre-printed
think
that.
that they're still going to be able to make
I get
changes to it. It's, if you have a pre-printed secret
Yes.
ballot, it's just like anything else on the Australian ballot, whether it be, who's running for town office or whatever. And people need to realize that if they say, for example, this town budget is going to be $4 million, somebody can't say, oh, but I want to take this part away and I want to add something else. You can't do that.
Yeah, no, good point. Thanks for that. We'll add that in.
Close to 70.
Thank you, Linda. Jeff?
Have some different angles.
Yeah.
If you're looking for the library holds about 75 to 100, depending on how you fit them in there, you squeeze them in there. It's hard to say how many people will be coming to this. Camel's Hump would be okay. The elementary school would probably hold a bunch as well. You might want to offer to the school district to pay the staff person's time. And that might make a difference as to, how receptive they are. And I would talk to the superintendent.
Okay.
It's hard for me to imagine that the school district wouldn't help the town have a public meeting and a building in our town that we pay for.
Mhm. Would the board be open to helping to pay for wages?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, I think that's a great point.
Even
Take that one.
overtime wages, if that's what it,
Yeah, it probably would be Saturday morning.
yeah.
Yeah, and 9 a.m. Saturday, November 9th works in general.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
I mean,
All right, I'll
it's
follow-
not critical, but I will not be here on that date.
Oh, no, back to zero.
That's why they set that date.
Well, actually, the interesting.
Figured that was calculated decisions.
So the interesting thing about it is I don't think we even need a quorum of the select board because it's a meeting of the people. So as long as Linda's there to take minutes and help run it with Clint, our moderator,
And we have some
it
JPs
is,
there.
it is
Yeah.
the people's meeting.
If you're not there, you will hear about it.
No, yes, you will. Okay.
Can't wait.
Make a list of things we can delegate to Adam and
Virgin Islands.
I got several. I'm
Okay.
sure wherever he's vacationing will be good.
I can bring the disco ball.
No. Consideration of approval of transferring management of Richmond Recreational Soccer to Mansfield United.
So yeah, this is more of a housekeeping after the board basically made this decision at the last meeting when they talked about the fund and no longer getting money into the fund and using it for soccer and volunteers green related expenses. But following up with Fran afterwards, she asked, well, because it was initially created by the town, the soccer program was, should the select board make a motion to officially transfer the management of that program to Mansfield United? That made sense to me, so I wanted to put it on here. That way the intent in 20 years when this comes up again is very clear that you were transferring the management to the Mansfield United and the funds was going to kind of run out
Yeah, and I think the draft motion and the minute, I mean, the memo makes sense. Mr. Chairman, I move to transfer the management responsibilities for the Richmond Recreational Soccer Program to Mansfield United, provided they continue to keep the program open to all interested Richmond youth wishing to play recreational soccer.
Thank you, Jay. Do we have a second?
Is Bart, I'll second that.
Thank you, Bart. Any further discussion? Hearing none, seeing none, calling the motion to a vote, please identify yourself and signify your vote.
Adam, aye.
Lisa, I.
Bart, aye.
Jay, I,
David, aye. Motion passes. Thank you.
Jeff, this is the next one to you.
Bert. Actually, I'm gonna take the
Bless you.
lead on this one.
okay.
Jeff and I talked about it, went over stuff, and basically the program is as
Confusing.
I'd say mismanaged, but that's maybe strong, but as we all expected, and Jeff was leading us to believe. But so yeah, I guess we're eligible to apply. We got our energy audit back today after Jeff and I talked. The deadline is next Friday. We put together a tentative proposal, which you know, we needed to find something that was big enough to absorb a significant amount of funds, small enough that it was actually doable. And kind of what we came up with potentially would be to re-insulate the post office and portions of the post office and all the supporting stuff along with that, primarily being the roof, and then possibly replacing the HVAC with modern heat pumps. It'll get us right to the funding limit. So hopefully we qualify, and hopefully we can qualify for close to the maximum amount. So I guess what we would need to do tonight, we haven't filled out an application or anything. So the two things we need to do would be to appoint myself as an authorized representative. And that would allow me to fill out the application. And then also to appoint Josh as a signatory. So he would be able to sign and actually submit the application when it was.
Mr. Chairman, so moved.
I'll second.
Just one question.
You're like,
No, this is the time, right? We talked about going back to the town center committee.
Yeah, so we do this and then we put the proposal, put the application together, but we were going to cancel our committee meeting next week.
All right, you're on the committee.
Because we needed more than 2 weeks to accomplish all our action items. So instead of canceling it, we're gonna have our plan was to have a short meeting. I'm gonna propose we have a short 20 or 30-minute meeting to kind of review it quick, make sure the committee is all on board, and we'll have time to do that. And then that is a tight timeline, so we'll do that next Wednesday, but I think I can pretty confidently say everyone in the committee will be on board with this proposal, and I don't foresee any issues there. And so that would give us 2 days to submit a already completed application.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Sounds good.
Hopefully Jeff's done all the legwork, but we're making the best out of a tough program. Yeah. So hopefully we can pull through.
Including the tight timeline. Yeah, that's
Really tight timeline, yeah. We're in a good spot, I think, as far as we could be with all the stuff Jeff has done and the work over the past few years on
but you beat out a number of other municipalities. So.
Yeah.
What I alluded to with Charlie.
We can't hear you unless you come up. Or rather the microphone.
Yeah, we can hear you, but the rest of the world, yeah.
What I was trying to allude to with Charlie is they've got $35 million. You got, say you have 100 applicants. That average is $350,000 an applicant. You know, Barton, the town of Barton, for example, or Bolton, or any number of small towns, they're not going to be able to come up with hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of things to do, particularly considering that they're limiting the types of measures that they're interested in. They're prioritizing. So they're not prioritizing solar or EV chargers. They're prioritizing weatherization and insulation. And it's hard to get a big enough project for insulation unless you've done the groundwork to do it, which we have done, you know? So like planning to insulate an entire building is a pretty involved project. And, you know, the one good thing we are we're in a good position from last year because we have a lot of information about what to do to these buildings and how much it might cost. The post office is a relatively discrete project that doesn't impact the rest of the building. And, you know, this part of the building has a lot of interconnected pieces. You touch one piece, you have to touch another, and it gets very expensive very quickly. So.
Yep.
We probably have a small likelihood of this unless they have miscalculated on how to disperse this money and they come up to the end of November and they don't know where to send that money. Because this is ARPA money. It has to be obligated by the end of the year, which is very soon from now.
Yeah.
And so obligation for them means a signed grant agreement with the town, which is light speed from here going forward. So just, so how we're in a good position is we could do that.
We want to help.
A lot of other towns might struggle to do that.
Yeah, unfortunately, the poor implementation might not allow the program to accomplish its goals as far as helping energy burdened communities, but that might benefit us, which is not great, but we would be crazy to not take advantage.
Yeah. Okay, well, we have a motion on the floor. Absent any further discussion, calling the motion to a vote.
Oh, Adam, abstain?
Lisa, aye.
Bart, aye.
Jay, I.
David, aye.
Yeah, it's good.
Cool. Thank you, Jay. Thank you, Adam. I mean, yeah.
Yeah.
That's the second.
Jay, you've done a lot tonight.
What's his name?
Moving on. Okay, next is consideration of appointing a voting delegate to the Vermont League of Cities and Towns Property and Casualty Intermunicipal Fund and Employment Resource and Benefits Trust Annual Business Meetings.
So who's going to town fair?
I'm not gonna be able to go. I realize my wife's out of town that.
Okay, so I'm the
Yeah,
only one going?
I could.
Lunch?
My wife's
Okay,
gonna
so
be in
that-
Texas and I'm gonna deal with my kids. There is a Zoom option,
Comparison.
so.
Well, I'm
I mean,
gonna see
what this
if
is.
you're gonna be there,
Mr. Chairman, I move to appoint Jay Spur as a voting delegate from Richmond for the annual meeting of the VLCT, PACIF and VERB.
Thank you, Jay. Do we have a second?
This is Bart. I will second that.
Jay,
Thank
can
you,
you,
Bart.
can you give me like a 30-second spiel of what this is? And
Town
anyone
fair.
that's listening.
Town fair is basically a convention for municipal and state officials. It's gonna be held at Killington. The town will pay for you to go. It moves around. Last time it was in South Burlington. I think this year it's back in Killington. So there's a ton of panels. There's whole tracks of things you can go to, and they're all super duper interesting.
Yeah.
They're really applied stuff. But there are also 3 business meetings of essentially the same organization. VLCT, which owns PACIF, and what's the relationship of VLCT and VERB?
it's the same thing.
Basically, so there are technically 3 business,
It's an
there are technically
instru-
3
yeah.
business meetings of parts of the same organization. And so VLCT will be bringing forth they had various meetings over in like August and July of various policy bodies. Anybody could show up. And so we discussed and developed proposed policies for the next legislative session, like what should VLCT be lobbying for? And so all that's going to come together and we're going to vote on that and we can amend it from the floor. We can say, actually, I think we should also have this. There'll also be election of officers. Not much really happens at the PACIF and VERB parts of the meeting, except for just ratifying and electing officers. It's more the VLCT part that's kind of interesting.
Awesome. Thanks.
So I consider it worth going to. Also, it's a great place to make contacts with, and you can say, your town is a lot like my town. You guys actually handled this situation. Can I get your number? Because that's part of what those panels are. People who've dealt with certain things will be there and they'll say, here's how we handled that complete mess. For example, the stormwater thing could well be a panel.
Yeah.
So if you
Maybe
have,
we'll be there in 5 years presenting on how we made it all better.
so if you weren't doing anything on Tuesday, October 1st,
Well, I think the Tuesday's the day before, right? Because I think the main seminars are the second.
well, the first time I went, they were this, or maybe they weren't. I don't.
Maybe I've got it wrong. I
let me
thought
check.
that the long day of seminars was the second. But maybe I'm.
Still want to go?
No, you're right. You're absolutely right. I'm looking now. The
Are you going
This
for
is
both
different.
days then?
VLCT, PACIF, and VERB are Zoom only.
Oh, they're Zoom only. I did not read that closely enough at all. I thought there was in-person and Zoom.
Yep, they're Zoom only. So actually, any of us who feels like doing,
Yeah.
I mean, I'm happy to be the person who dials into them and votes, but then October 2nd is the fun stuff.
And I think Jim Cantori
Yeah.
is at the October 2nd. He's
Yeah,
the
Jim
keynote
Cantor is the
speaker,
keynote speaker.
which I think you have a certain number of FEMA declared emergencies and he automatically comes to your state.
Well, you know, if you're ever somewhere on vacation, you see Jim Cantori, leave.
Oh, he's not that bad.
Oh, man.
Yeah, I went my very first year, I learned tons.
Yeah, no, the seminars are wonderful. The few years I've been able to go, they're great.
Are we ready to vote?
Oh, Adam, I.
Lisa, I.
All right.
Jay, I.
David, I. Congratulations, Jay.
Woo!
Next is consideration of setting dates for the fiscal year 26 budget meetings. Budget time.
Mr. Chairman, I move to hold special select board meetings for the purpose of discussing the fiscal year 26 budget on Tuesday, October 15th, Monday, November 11th, and Monday, December 9th.
Thank you, Jay. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Lisa. Any further discussion? Hearing none, calling the motion to a vote, please identify yourself and signify your vote.
Adam, I.
Lisa, I.
Bard, I. Jay, I.
David, I. Okay, only 10 minutes behind schedule. Okay, moving on to approval of minutes.
Sorry, David, I won't be here not 11th. You don't need me, but
Okay,
so there'll be a quorum still.
That's the November one. Yeah.
That would be, yeah.
Okay.
Let me just double check.
isn't November 11th a holiday?
Yeah.
Yeah, Veterans Day.
That's Veterans Day.
Oh,
Okay, well then I want to amend the motion. Tell me what date to put in.
Tuesday, November 12th.
Sounds good.
Tuesday?
I will modify the motion to be Tuesday, October 15th, Tuesday, November 12th, and Monday, December 9th.
Lisa, do you want to second the amendment?
I will, I do. And I did.
Now we're voting on the amendment. This is to change the Monday, November 11th to Tuesday, November 12th. Please identify yourself and signify your vote.
Adam, I.
Lisa, I.
Bard, I. Jay, I.
David, I.
David, you give me his dates again? Somebody.
Tuesday, October 15th, Tuesday,
Okay.
November 12th, and Monday, December 9th, 2 days after my anniversary.
Good.
And this time we'll try not to hold a water and sewer
Fiasco.
fiasco.
I thought you guys did this budgeting thing last year again.
It's like
You guys didn't do this already?
We actually going
I didn't know this was an annual thing.
Right. Gosh, last year I needed 4 weeks, right?
I think we did.
Exactly the same.
It's not uncommon where we need an extra one sometimes in January or something to tie it up. But these extra meetings, I've found them super useful. When we have, I think my first year here, we tried to just do it during a regular select board meeting. It was not
No, God.
It's
effective.
not as effective at all. So having it gives us time to kind of get feedback, make some changes. It's a process and a good one, I think. So thank you all for the extra time during the fall.
We have nothing else. Okay, moving on to approval of minutes, warrants, and purchase orders. I'll start with a motion to approve the minutes of the September 3rd meeting as presented.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we approve or accept the minutes of the September 3rd meeting as presented.
Thank you, Lisa. Do we have a second?
Is Bart, I'll second that.
Thank you, Bard. Anybody notice any changes that need to be made to those minutes?
My printer ran out of ink.
So hearing none, approving the minutes as presented. Please identify yourself and signify your vote.
Adam, I.
Lisa, I.
Bard, aye.
Jay, I.
David, aye. Okay. Moving on to purchase orders.
I move to approve purchase order number 4907 to Mount Mansfield Unified School District for education taxes in an amount not to exceed $2,201,760.72.
Thank you, Adam. Do we have a second?
This is Jay, I'll second.
Thank you, Jay. So this is a motion to approve purchase order 4907 to Mount Mansfield Unified Union School District for education taxes in an amount not to exceed $2,201,760.72. So just for clarification, these are taxes that the town of Richmond collects and then turns over to the school district. This is the education portion of the property tax. Any further discussion? Hearing none, calling the motion to a vote, please identify yourself and signify your vote.
Oh, Adam, I.
Lisa, I.
Bard, aye.
Jay, I.
David, aye. Moving on to purchase order 4944. Somebody want to move purchase order 4944?
Not looking at it.
Mr. Chairman, I move purchase order 4944 to ENS Transport in an amount not to exceed, for stone and stuff, an amount not to exceed $10,000.
Thank you, Jay. Do we have a second?
As Bard, I'll second that.
Thank you, Bard. Absent any further discussion, calling the motion to a vote, please identify yourself and signify your vote.
Adam, I.
Lisa, I.
Bard, aye.
Jay, I.
David, aye. Next, purchase order 4950 to Heinsberg Sand and Gravel.
I move to amend purchase order number 4950 to Heinsberg Sand and Gravel for material for road repair due to flooding to an amount of $100,000, $100,688.14.
This is Jay, I'll second.
Thank you, Adam. Thank you, Jay. So this is a purchase order which was initially approved for $70,000 and needs to be amended for $100,688.14. Okay, calling the motion to a vote, please identify yourself and signify your vote.
Adam, I.
Lisa, I.
Bard, aye.
Jay, I.
David, aye. Next, I'll entertain a motion to approve purchase order 5030 to the Howard Center for the Community Outreach Program in an amount not to exceed $10,490.
Mr. Chairman, so moved.
Thank you, Adam. Thank you, Jay.
As Bard, I'll second that.
Thank you, Bard. Okay. Calling the motion to a vote, please identify yourself and signify your vote.
Adam, I.
Lisa, I.
Bard, aye.
Jay, I.
David, aye. And the warrants.
Mr. Chairman, move to approve the warrants as presented.
Thank you, Jay.
I'll second.
Thank you, Lisa. Anybody have any questions on the warrants as presented?
No, sir.
Okay, this is a motion to approve the warrants as presented. Please identify yourself and signify your vote.
Adam, I.
Lisa, I.
Bard, aye.
Jay, I.
And David, aye. Okay, let's talk about what to talk about for the next agenda.
I think the town should consider joining the Columbia Record and Tape Club.
For only 1 cent?
For only 1 cent, we can get 11 albums.
Where did that come from?
You think they
Just
would
wanna say
modern
for
times and have CDs now too, or do we have
They
to
might-
get
they
cassette
might.
tapes?
I like it, well, cassette tapes are always my favorite.
Oh, gosh.
I haven't thought of that in 40 years.
I don't know what made it pop into my head.
It seems like too good of a bargain to pass up.
Yeah, it does.
So,
We can bring Heinsberg Road back in next agenda.
Do it before they get rid of
We
it.
will have a Cochrane Road study briefing from CCRPC. And there will be the zoning hearing that we're gonna have, and probably a lot more because we have a 3-week break.
follow up on the stormwater.
And do we have any
Yep.
progress
Yeah.
on the employee recognition? Who's he, what's it?
Duncan's reached out to a few restaurants to try to get a date. We carved out the recognition of Rebecca because the trustees are already working on a get together for her.
She deserves it.
Anything else? Okay, let's talk possible executive sessions.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, I move to find a premature public knowledge about candidates for employment in the police department would cause the town or person to suffer a substantial disadvantage.
Thank you, Jay. Do we have a second?
As Bard, I'll second that.
Thank you, Bart. Calling the motion to a vote, please identify yourself and signify your vote.
Adam, I.
Lisa, I.
Bard, aye.
Jay, I.
David, aye. Motion carries.
I move that we enter executive session to discuss candidates for employment in the police department under provisions of 1 VSA 313A3 and to invite town manager Josh Arneson into executive session.
Thank you, Adam. Do we have a second?
This is Jay, I'll second.
Thank you, Jay. Calling the motion to a vote, please identify yourself and signify your vote.
Adam, I.
Lisa, I.
Bard, aye.
Jay, I.
David, aye. We are in executive session. Welcome back, everyone.
Mr. Chairman, I move to find premature public knowledge about the review of the town manager would cause the town or person to suffer a substantial disadvantage.
Thank you, Jay. Do we have a second?
I'll second, Lisa.
Thank you, Lisa. Calling the motion to a vote, please identify yourself and signify your vote.
Adam, I.
Lisa, I.
Bart, I.
Jay, aye.
David, I.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we enter an executive session to discuss the review of the town manager under the provisions of 1 VSA 313A3 and invite town manager Josh Arneson into the executive session.
Thank you, Jay. Do we have a second?
Adam, I.
Thank you, Adam.
Adam, second.
Good. 2 for 1 there.
Good catch.
Calling the motion to a vote, please identify yourself and signify your vote.
Adam, second, I.
Adam, I. Lisa, I.
Jay, aye.
David, I.
Mr. Chairman, I move we already did.
They're gonna adjourn now.
Did everything.
We adjourned.
Jay,
Second.
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 Thank you, Adam. Calling the motion to a vote, please identify yourself and signify your vote.
Adam, I.
Adam, I.
Everybody's Adam tonight. Adam, I need one more signature from you.
Bart, aye. Adam, aye.
Adam, I. We are adjourned.